All right, welcome to week 7 of English 123. Congratulations on finishing the drafting for your research project, your research essay. And so we're going to be moving into the final draft, revising and refining for that final draft that you'll be turning in this Sunday. So you're going to be hearing some repetition of some things I've already brought up in previous videos, but these things are really important to keep in mind when you're revising and working on this final draft. Good writing always has specific qualities that we need to remind ourselves of and to continue to aim and to have a goal of working towards. So some repetition isn't always a bad thing with a writing class. These are principles and ideas that we need to maintain in our minds as we write for our future assignments. So just please be patient and just keep in mind that this is stuff that you'll benefit from hearing again. And you'll probably hear it again in other classes with other professors. I'm certain that they will probably provide you feedback on your writing and your writing development, not just in that particular discipline that you're in, but just in the actual writing and composition of the papers themselves. So for this final draft, you're going to be obviously working on and revising and editing your existing drafts that you've been working on, draft 1 and draft 2. Once you receive the feedback for draft 1, I finished the grading, so you should have that already. But once you review that, you definitely want to incorporate some of those points, some of that feedback into your latest draft. And unfortunately, you won't likely receive the feedback for draft 2 before you finish your final draft, unfortunately. It's just the timing of the grading and everything. But if I'm able to get that done as soon as possible, I'll certainly do that. But I want to give you, as much time as I can to really give you the grade that you've earned. So some of the things I want to remind you of for this final draft, and I want you to revise and refine in this way. Uh, Again, remember that your introduction is setting the context for your paper. It is introducing the subject of your paper to the reader. The reader has no idea. Just assume the reader does not know that much about what you're writing. You are somewhat of an expert. Now, of course, you're not the expert like the scholars are, but you're more of an expert, particularly than the reader. The reader is learning from you. So assume that they don't know, as much as you do. So orient the reader to your subject, your overall subject, and of course that introduction is going to narrow itself down. It's going to narrow down specifically to your thesis statement, and that can either be just a one statement or it can be statements as you kind of elaborate on that, as Dr. Sung has pointed out. And again, you may use third person, you may use first person. Of course, it just depends on what you feel more comfortable with. As long as you're able to maintain that academic formality, I don't see a problem with it. But just always keep that in mind. And an academic tone that is not conversational. It's not necessarily to a friend. It's not an email. It's not a text. It's a formal academic paper. So you want to keep that in mind regardless of the tense that you use. First person tends to be a little more casual, or can come across as a little more casual, but of course it's now being more widely accepted academically. So I leave it up to you, whatever you feel more comfortable with. But the thesis statement should encompass, it should be the nucleus of what your paper is going to be about. And there should be some foreshadowing in that thesis statement to kind of give an idea of what's to come. So as Dr. Sung has said, by reading the thesis statement, I should already know what your paper is going to be about. It shouldn't be, I shouldn't have to, the reader shouldn't be scratching their head thinking, now I wonder what they're going to be talking about. There really should be a clear idea of what the paper is about and what you're arguing and what your position is. The last thing you want is vagueness. The last thing you want is something that's not clear. You want your reader to clearly understand what you're writing. Don't leave it up to the reader to figure it out. Don't leave it up to the reader to really connect the dots. Make it clear, okay? So even a friend can read your paper. Someone who may not even be in college or maybe not even have a degree in college. It could just be a friend that you have that can just read the paper and to see if they can understand it. Now, if they, of course, are a fellow college student or someone who's is a graduate of college, that's great too. They're going to have some insight into that academically. But regardless of somebody's academic experience, as long as they're able to understand what you're saying and what you're trying to convey, that's good. Okay, that's a start. So remember, clarity is most important. The reader has to understand what you're discussing and where you're going with your paper. Okay, so introduction, you're introducing, you're allowing the topic to interact. You're allowing the reader to interact with the topic and to, in a sense, shake hands with it, as I've said before. So introduce them together and then boil down to that thesis statement, which is your argument, which is your conclusion, really, of your introduction. And so remember, you want to be focused on, in this revision, of transitions. So typically, you want to transition between paragraphs. You want to use the idea from the previous paragraph to set up the next paragraph. So it's a seamless transition from one thought to the next. It's really important because if there's no transition, then the reader has to think, how do these paragraphs connect? What's the idea that's being woven through these paragraphs? So if you use transitions, if you need help with that, definitely reach out to me. I can try to find a resource. It's definitely in your handbook. It's on Purdue OWL. So specifically read about transitions. That way, the idea is that the thesis statement is one thread woven through all of your paragraphs. Okay, and those transitions are going to maintain that thread the whole way through. Okay, so topic sentences, they're so important. Okay, you want, and you may see this feedback. The topic sentence is to establish the main point of that paragraph that you're arguing, that is the point of support to the thesis statement. Okay, so if you don't start the paragraph off with a clear, strong, uh, active voiced topic sentence, the paragraph is going to be somewhat unclear because it's going to be, well, what's the main point? What are we really saying in this? And sometimes um, some students will start paragraphs off with a quote, or they'll give a brief statement and then go right into a quote. That's not always a good idea because that can cause some confusion. It's better to begin with that topic sentence, which conveys the specific point that you're arguing in that paper, and then let everything trickle down from there. Everything should trickle down from the topic sentence through the paragraph, which will be your supportive material and your discussion and analysis of your quotes, maybe any kind of counter views or bringing another source to kind of either support or to show another view about what the topic sentence is saying. And then typically, and you don't have to do it as overtly as therefore, but there should be some kind of wrapping up at the end of that paragraph, some kind of conclusion. It can be a soft conclusion, or depending on how emphatic you want to be on that point, you can conclude it with the therefore, thus, hence, one of those types of phrases at the end. And that just kind of encapsulates the paragraph. It helps the reader see that this paragraph is a chunk of information that pertains to this particular topic sentence. Okay, and so then you begin to see the paragraphs shaping as chunks of information similar to an outline. Okay, so it's following an outline. Your outline is basically your topic sentences. So be aware of that. Introduction, thesis statement, transitions, topic sentences, supportive detail, one point to the next. And if a paragraph seems out of place, if it seems like a digression, think about it. Maybe it can be repositioned somewhere else in the paper. Maybe it's too early. Maybe you've jumped to a different aspect of the argument. Maybe you've moved into a subpoint and you just didn't cue the reader. Always cue the reader and let them know where you're going. And it doesn't have to be in a wordy sense. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but just those little cues, those transitional cues that can allow the reader to see, okay, there's a subpoint coming up. There's something new coming up. Okay? So how these things relate. Use relational phrases and clauses. On this hand and on the other hand. Those types of things. In contrast to, additionally, hence, furthermore, moreover. Those types of phrases, they really help the reader and cue them as to how the flow of the paper is turning out and where it's moving. It points. These are pointer words that point to specific details. So yes, so concluding paragraph progression, then that's going to, you're going to go through your, obviously your introduction, your historical information, which is kind of an extension of your introduction. It's a little more in depth, it's a little more elaborate, a little more analytical of the history behind your topic, going more in depth. And there's going to be some supportive points to kind of back up the history and the context of the problem. You're talking about the history of the problem that you're arguing for a solution. And so then after that historical context, you'll be um, presenting your, well, not your solution, but solutions that are out there in the research. And it's always a good idea to have two, maybe three solutions that you discuss, saying, this source says this source says that. Here's where they compare and contrast. Here's where they conflict. Here's where they agree. This is typically the most conventional solution that's being um, advocated for by most scholars or most experts. And then we have, in contrast, we have this other conflicting view that a minority of scholars are advocating for, and it's a unique solution, and so I think this should be considered. So it just depends on how you want to go with it. But if you have two, maybe three solutions that you're discussing, it'll give you uh, a broader context to work with, and then you'll be able to develop that, discuss the criteria of what you believe is the best solution in that section, boil it down from those three to the one or the combination of two that you feel is the best solution, is the most reasonable solution for your problem, the problem that you're dealing with. Okay. Then from that, of course, after your advocacy is the conclusion, faith integration aspect of the paper. So then that's when you want to bring in the Christian point of view, the Christian worldview. I would not hesitate to use sources on that for what some experts may say. I mean, C.S. Lewis even has a lot to say about different social issues. Apologetics is a really important resource for this type of thing. So you may be aware of specific apologists that you may read on your own. You can always utilize those. So Bible commentaries are always good. I would say, you don't want to go too heavy on it. You just want to maybe add one or two, um, you know, scholarly, you know, um, analytical commentary sources there on maybe a specific Christian principle that you may be applying to your faith integration there. That's an option. Okay. Uh, of course, you can use scripture. Of course, you can discuss scripture. It's always good to have some commentary to back that up. A good, solid, um, respected apologist or commentator or scholar, biblical scholar, would be good to use in that. And sometimes last minute research is necessary. You get to the end and you find something you want to discuss. Oh, I have this, faith integration element. I just need one little, quote from an expert on eschatology or, soteriology or some kind of theological thing, Christology, something. And, you're able to find that and incorporate it. So be flexible. You may have a source that you may need to find to really say what you need to say. So, and then of course your final conclusion, which is somewhat of a summary of the points that you've discussed throughout the paper, and it is a final statement as to how they support your thesis, how those points culminate in a final therefore conclusion for your paper. Therefore, in light of these uh, points that I've discussed, these points A, B, C, D, one can reasonably conclude that such and such should be thus and so. Okay. As usual, please email me if you have questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Right now, we're just revising and working on the final stages of this paper. I wish you all the best. God bless, and looking forward to working on the multimodal project. There'll be more being said in this section on that, so there'll be some examples for you to review. And so keep in mind, this week's assignment is due this last Sunday, the 7th day of this week, of week 7. The following week, week 8, your multimodal project will be due on the Friday of week 8. So Friday, is the end of the course, essentially. So then grades are going to be due that following Monday. So I'll be grading multimodal projects that weekend. Uh, the last day to turn in any late work that you may have floating out there is this Wednesday. Okay. So unfortunately, after Wednesday, I can't accept any more late work, even by arrangement, even by contact me, but I can't really accept any further work after that point. So if this assignment, if week 7, the final assignment is late, unfortunately, I'm unable to accept late work for week 7's assignment, the final draft. And for the multimodal, I'm unable to accept late work for the final multimodal draft. So these assignments have to be turned in on the deadline, unfortunately. So it's just what we have to do for logistical purposes to make sure grading is getting done on time. So again, you have till Wednesday. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding this or any other course material. Good luck and all the best to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.